Today, we're going to look at one of the most unsporty sports watches. Pretty much the Rolls-Royce Wraith of the watch world. The Patek Philippe 5712. Welcome back to Bark and Jack. I'm Adrian, and if you're new here, welcome. This channel is just about me exploring watches without pretension, without snobbery. I explore pretty much everything from all over the spectrum, but my idea is just to learn about watches and share with you my experiences. If you're into that sort of stuff, hit subscribe down the bottom because it really does help to build the channel. This channel is completely independent. It's not sponsored by any watch brands or watch companies. It's kept going by people supporting the channel through buying my watch straps. If you're interested in NATO straps, jump over to barkandjack.com and sort yourself out with an awesome NATO strap. Watch this video first, then do that. This watch belongs to a watch collector who watches the channel. We grabbed a coffee and explored quite a few of his watches. Today we are going to explore the 5712. It's part of the Nautilus range and it has small seconds, power reserve and moon phase. Before I start dissecting the different areas and sharing my thoughts on this watch, let's have a look at the specs. The 5712 was launched in 2006 and it was an update to the 3721. Now the dimensions on this thing are a bit odd. It's quite difficult. It's kind of like when you measure a chronograph, it looks a bit weird. The design is quite weird. We'll touch on that, but ultimately it is 43 millimeters wide when you include the ears on the edge. When you go from 10 o'clock down to 4 o'clock, that actually measures 40 millimeters. So it's quite bizarre. I kind of feel like it sounds on paper that it'll wear large, but it's manageable. I usually wear a 36 millimeter watch or a 40 millimeter watch. This didn't feel too big. The first thing that jumps out to me is the fact that this watch is only 8.52 millimeters thick. Not particularly beefy, but that is one of the first things that hits you as being incredibly impressive. It's got a screw-down crown. It is a sports watch, so it should have a screw-down crown. But that being said, it's only water-resistant to 60 meters, which is not particularly impressive. It's got a sapphire case back, so you can see the incredible movement. And this is an in-house automatic caliber 240 PS IRM CLU. We'll delve into what that all means later on. The watch retails for £30,540 or roughly around $39,000. Now for the majority of us, the price is going to be the first barrier to get access to this watch. Even if you do have the money for this watch, there's roughly a 5-year waitlist, a 5-year to you're not going to get this watch waitlist. And if you think the Rolex Steel Sports World is crazy, the Patek Sports World is even more crazy. My favorite Nautilus is the 5711, just a plain time-only date, and I love how the date window on the 5711 is very subtle and it adds a nice amount of symmetry to the dial. At a glance, this dial is odd. The layout there's so little symmetry within this layout. But one thing that I like about some watches is when you go deeper, when you kind of start to analyze what is going on, then you start to realize that actually it does all work. They've thought about the placement. They've sacrificed the main kind of flagship area for the logo to be right bang in the middle at the top there. They've moved that down to kind of prioritize that power reserve indicator. The fact that they've used a small second hands, I like the look of the small second hands, but I like the fact that they've thought of that space. They've thought that the small seconds, although it's taking up real estate on the dial, it's less intrusive than having a long seconds hand in the middle that's sweeping all over the other indications. A sports watch that has a moon phase, it doesn't make any sense. It's completely unnecessary. But that's kind of this level of sports watch. It's called a sports watch, but is it actually a sports watch? So in my eyes, at a glance, a dial just doesn't work, and this wouldn't be my first choice. But as I say, when you start to delve into it and kind of dissect what's going on, I actually start to appreciate the dial. And the more time that I spent with this watch, I actually really liked it. The overall design of the Nautilus itself, let alone whatever reference you're looking at, is a bit of a weird point. A lot of people bash smaller brands who use off-the-shelf movements because they focus on design as opposed to the watch-making side of things. And Patek's certainly in this instance, is the complete opposite to that. Whereas they didn't design the Nautilus. They can't take credit of the overall air, the overall design, the iconic side of the Nautilus. That all goes to Gerald Genta. So I'm going to talk favorably about the design, but that's not really something that Patek can take credit for because it was done before, it was literally handed to them. But we'll touch on that history in another video. As I mentioned, the Nautilus range is so iconic. You kind of have the, let's say the Submariner is kind of like a BMW M3, let's say. A lot of people want it. It's a good fun watch, and it's more obtainable than the majority of supercars. I feel like the Nautilus is probably up there with something like the Ferrari F40, Lamborghini Countach. It's kind of that poster boy watch that we all dream of, but is incredibly unobtainable. Also, would it be actually used for the purpose that it's been intended, or has it actually been intended to be used for what it's been marketed for? How many people raced a Lamborghini Countach? It's one of those weird things. That being said, about Patek not being able to take credit for the overall design, the one thing that Patek can take credit for within the design of this watch is how thin that case is. It's incredibly thin, 8.5 millimeters thick. The thinness of the case and the diameter of the case give it a really kind of contrasting feel. So you've got quite a wide case at 40 millimeters to 43 millimeters, depending on how you look at it. So it's got the presence of a sports watch. It's got quite a large, chunky presence. But then the thinness gives it this air of elegance and dressiness about it. That is how it gets its massively versatile look. The style of this watch fits everything possible. The chap who owns it, he was wearing ripped jeans. He just had a jumper on and then a denim jacket. He was very cash, very chilled out, and this watch looked brilliant. Had he turned up in a suit, this watch would have looked equally brilliant. It's one of those watches that just fits, it works. The challenge about it having an 8.5 millimeter deep case is that the integrated bracelet then needs to also be equally thin. The bracelet being thin then needs to have a thin clasp. The overall feel of this watch feels incredibly dainty. It feels really quite delicate, and that's not the feeling you want for a sports watch. If you've ever held a vintage sub or a vintage sports watch of any kind, and you kind of feel how light and delicate the bracelet is and how light and delicate the clasp is, that's what this new watch feels like. So there's kind of a bit of a cognitive dissonance there around it being a sports watch, but when you hold it, it's actually very, very dainty. One thing that I really dislike about this watch is the clasp, but I feel like, I'm sure people who are able to afford these watches and people who get to wear them a lot might just get used to the clasp. People probably feel similar about the old Rolex stamped clasp, but this feels incredibly delicate. So although Patek can't take credit for the overall design, they can take credit for executing this engineering. The engineering side of it all is absolutely amazing, and of course the finish is absolutely amazing. The way Patek can make this watch 8.5 millimeters thick is by the incredible movement inside. There's so much engineering going on in that tiny, tiny space. The engineering inside is the caliber 240 PSIRM CLU. Now the base movement is the caliber 240. The letters afterwards indicate what the complications are added to this base movement. So the complications, I'm not going to pronounce the French words for what these abbreviations mean, but essentially means the PS is small seconds, the IRM is power reserve, the C is of course calendar, and then you've got the LU, which is the moon phase. The movement runs at a relatively slow pace compared to the majority of watches that I talk about and the majority of watches on the market. Most watches beat at around 28,800 beats per hour. This movement beats at 21,600 beats an hour. Generally speaking, the slower a movement operates, the longer it should last, because the less work the cogs are having to do. As you've seen, this has a micro rotor on the back, and of course it's Patek, so it's 22 karat gold. I'm being facetious. The gold actually has a genuine purpose. Being a micro rotor, it doesn't have as much mass to move. Gold being heavier than steel, it means that the micro rotor, now being gold, is able to wind a mainspring that has the ability to power this watch for 48 hours. And this is where my mind blows with all this engineering and kind of just being in awe of what watchmakers can come up with. If we very simplistically compare this 5712 to my 20-year-old Rolex Explorer, this has a caliber 3000 movement in it. It's a very old movement, and it's a time-only movement. This watch has a full-size rotor, probably 3 times the size of the rotor within this Patek. The power reserve of this guy is only 42 hours. So that kind of highlights the difference in watchmaking ability between Rolex and Patek. So Rolex has created a movement that can only power a time-only watch for 42 hours off one mainspring using a full-size rotor. If we work backwards on the Patek movement, we have time, we have date, we have power reserve, and then we have the moon phase. All of those extra complications are being powered through a mainspring that is strong enough to move all of those cogs to engineer all of these complications, but equally it's weak enough to be powered by a small rotor. Now, I might be missing a few things here. My understanding of the mechanics of a watch are very, very basic, but in my eyes, this is just incredible engineering. The fact that Patek have created this little machine that can power all of this information off one spring being powered by a tiny rotor, that's just mind blown. And this is why I love watches. I'm just in complete awe of what people are able to make. And that kind of goes a little bit of the way to justify the cost of Patek, but that's debatable. Now in danger of this video becoming another version of me gushing over a watch brand and not giving quite a fair kind of side to the argument, let's bring Patek back to the real world and compare it to normal things. So Patek, on the back of their movement, they have a double P. They have a PP stamp, which is the Patek seal of approval. Previously, Patek would use the Genevan seal of approval and then COSC certification to kind of say that this movement has been created to a certain standard and it's operating within a certain standard. Patek have now moved away from using those traditional industry standard seals of approval and created their own. I find this quite odd and really quite self-indulgent, especially as Patek have their logo on the dial. Surely that is, and they have the logo on the movement, surely that is enough to say this is a Patek Philippe watch and it hits a certain standard. It's not as if Patek are going to send out a watch with a subpar movement that is going to be absent of that PP stamp, but they're still going to sell it. It's just maybe a knockdown price. That they're not going to do that. So I kind of feel like it's a bit unnecessary. Be proud of your name, of course they're going to be, but you don't need to have something pretentious like a double P stamp to say this has a Patek seal of approval. No shit, it says it on the dial. All their movements above 20 millimeters in diameter operate at a more accurate rate than COSC certification, and this is -3 to +2 seconds a day. Now that's not as accurate as Rolex or Omega. Rolex are expected to operate between -2 and +2 seconds a day, and Omega's METAS approved movements operate between -2 and +2 seconds a day, and in incredibly difficult environments with magnetic interference and heat changes, they have to still operate within that incredibly strict rate of accuracy. Patek said that their movements should be serviced every 3 to 5 years, which really isn't very impressive at all, but that's quite a broad statement, and that kind of encompasses all their vintage models as well. But with that in mind, Omega suggested their movements are serviced every 5 to 8 years, and Rolex say that their movement should be serviced every 10 years. Now, without a doubt, the finishing on the Patek movement is going to be far, far superior than Omega and Rolex put together. So things that I like about this watch: love the design. It's incredible design. The watch, it's one of those things that you kind of have to experience and get hands-on with it. On paper, it looks a bit funny, but actually, I really do enjoy the dial and enjoy what it's showing. It's very clear. It tells you a lot of information. The movement inside is just incredible, and it's one of those things that you, as a watch lover, you just get excited about. And then of course it's Patek. There's such a huge level of prestige, and although I don't like the snobbery side of the watch world, if you kind of remove that the snobbery side of owning that level of watch and just appreciate the kind of level of watch that is, then I kind of feel like that's where the nice part of the prestige is. I guess we're talking about a luxury that a lot of us can get on board with. Luxury is kind of all relative, and it means different things to different people. But for a lot of us, I think we can appreciate that Patek is hitting that luxury mark. There aren't many things that I dislike about this watch. Maybe if I had it on my wrist for a couple of months, I might spot a few things that are annoying about it. But the only thing that really stood out to me was that clasp. The clasp was a real turn-off. It just felt too dainty. It didn't feel like it was substantial or impressive in the slightest. The weight list certainly is annoying. If I had that level of money, I'm pretty sure that weight list would just really piss me off. And ultimately, it isn't a 5711. For me, that is the dream. That's the grail. I do feel like the Nautilus range is a bit like Rolls-Royce having the Wraith as a sports car, or Porsche having the Cayenne as a 4x4 off-roader. It's kind of like, oh, we're going to dabble into this area. It's a commercial move. Of course, it's a commercial move. The sports side of this watch, it is weak. But ultimately, that's not why you get the watch. If I had £30,540, would I buy the watch? Hell yeah. It's a stunning watch. I'd love a Nautilus, and that thing would be on my wrist in a heartbeat if I was given the opportunity. Guys, let me know what you think about this watch. Of course, this price point it's a contentious price point. Is a watch genuinely worth £30,000? How much markup are they making? How much of that is purely on the brand side of that watch? And how much of it is actually in the watchmaking? It's all debatable, and you can apply that kind of mindset to everything in life, not just watches. But I'd love to know what you're thinking about this watch. I had a huge amount of fun playing with it, and I was really grateful for this chap allowing me to get so hands-on with this piece and spending so much time with me, taking me through his collection. I've got lots more videos coming up around this chap's collection, and he's got some tasty toys. Guys, thanks so much for hanging around. I know this was a long video. I just wanted to share as much as I could about this watch. If you want to support the channel, jump over to barkandjack.shop and help yourself to a really nice NATO strap. If you want to see some more detailed photographs of this piece, jump over to barkandjack.com. Hit subscribe down the bottom there if you haven't done so already, and hit that bell icon as well so you get notifications when the next videos drop. Hit the thumbs up button if you like the video, and check me out on Instagram at barkandjack, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.